guys, Allison here, the Bored Housewife. Thank you so much for joining me for another week's episode of The Bored Housewife. I am so excited for this new month and new week that we're having. As I mentioned a few times now, I am going to be covering the book The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. I have read this book several times, and it's one of those that every time I'm needing some motivation, some inspiration and good stuff, I pick this book up and reread it again, and it really helps kind of break through some stuff, and we're going to get into all of it very shortly. It reads very similar to The Art of Living. If you followed me along during that series, it's not exactly the same. This isn't necessarily a philosophical book, but I think some of his ideas translate really well philosophically, because it is a self-help book in a way that, you know, it gets you doing things again that you might have put on hold. But it's not a self-help book in, you know, the type that I don't typically like and I talk negatively about on here, where it's like, do this and you'll be great. You know, it's more of like thinking about what's going on in your life and what these things are that might be causing you from not doing what it is that you want to get done. So I just hope that this book can give you some perspective and help you kind of give you the push you might need to get started on something if it's creative. I'm going to get into everyone that this book is for, which is pretty much anybody who is trying to accomplish anything and having a hard time doing it. This book is for you, but I'll get into that more in a minute. But yeah, I just think it's a good time to do it. It's March. If you have some of those New Year's resolutions that you haven't totally upheld, this might help you get back into them again. And I know it's just spring is around the corner. It's just a good time to get started on stuff, right? So please grab your beverage of choice. I am having a screwdriver that is orange juice and vodka. So grab your beverage of choice or cocktail, whatever you got going on, and cheers, guys. Let's have some fun. Okay, so for this first part of the book, I have broken this book up into 3 parts, and then the last week of March, I'm just going to kind of recap everything and just kind of pull it all together. If you would like to follow along, I highly recommend buying this book. Like I said, I've reread this thing many times. But if not, I hope to give a nice overview for anybody who is, might relate to this and is trying to work some stuff out. But it is a good investment. So resistance is this term that he talks about in the book. And resistance is the whole first book 1. He has it broken into 3 books. So, the title of this episode, Resistance, what is it? Resistance, to sum it up, is basically anything that we use to distract ourselves. Any excuses we might make not to get something done. This book is pretty harsh when it comes to the bullshit that we tell ourselves and to stop telling ourselves the bullshit. And even the stuff that feels legitimate, he talks about as being resistance. So basically, even if your arm's falling off, once it gets better again, like, okay, move on with your life, right? So we're going to get into all that in a minute, but basically resistance is a distraction. Resistance is the thing that stops us from doing the thing that we want to do. So throughout this episode, I'm going to use myself as an example because I do get, I have a hard time writing sometimes, right? And I've talked about that so much on this podcast and still having a hard time. Maybe after I finish this series with you guys, I'll get back on the wagon of writing again. But yeah, so I'm going to use myself as an example, but this, and I'm going to get into it right now, really, is for anybody that has any sort of any project or endeavor or anything like that. So I'm going to be reading a lot from the book today. I hope my voice doesn't sound too monotonous, but I'll try to keep it interesting. So who does this affect? Who does resistance affect, okay? The pursuit of any calling in writing, painting, music, film, dance, or any creative art, however marginal or unconventional. So, like an artist. The launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise for profit or otherwise. Any diet or health regimen. I also identify with this one. Any program of spiritual advancement. Any activity whose aim is tighter abdominal. Oh my God. Any activity whose aim is tighter abdominals. And maybe anyone whose aim it is to say that word. Okay. Any course or program designed to overcome an unwholesome habit or addiction. So pretty serious there, right? Education of every kind. Any act of political, moral, or ethical courage, including the decision to change for the better some unworthy pattern of thought or conduct in ourselves. The undertaking of any enterprise or endeavor whose aim is to help others. Any act that entails commitment of the heart, the decision to get married, to have a child, to weather a rocky patch in a relationship. The taking of any principled stand in the face of adversity. In other words, any act that rejects immediate gratification in favor of long-term growth, health, or integrity. Or, expressed another way, any act that derives from our higher nature instead of our lower. Any of these will elicit resistance. Okay. I'm sure all of you have... I said something there that resonated with you. So, in the book a lot, he does use himself as an example as well, and he is a writer. But that doesn't mean that it's just for this. And I think that in the book, it definitely does not feel like it's just for artistic endeavors. I have definitely thought about it in terms of weight loss and working out and things like that. So yeah, if you fall under any of that, unless you're just perfect and don't have anything going on, never feel anything and just constantly are able to get over the hump and do it, like, good for you. That's awesome. For us, mortals down here, this book can be really helpful. Right. So what's kind of interesting is that Steven Pressfield almost didn't even write this book. He has a section about how resistance almost stopped him from making this. And you can see here too, it's like just one page kind of segment. Sometimes they're a few pages long, but it makes it really easy to read. But he talks about how, he's a fiction writer, so he felt kind of weird writing this like self-help like book. And, just kind of thought maybe he didn't have the authority to write this and all sorts of things going through his head. And he almost didn't. He almost instead kind of wrote it in like a fictional story instead of like this blunt laid out sort of thing. And then at the very end he says, what finally convinced me to go ahead was simply that I was so unhappy not going ahead. I was developing symptoms. As soon as I sat down and began, I was okay. So it's kind of interesting because like even he himself is still feeling this. He's just kind of figured out how to like get over those feelings and kind of recognize what resistance is. So, like, what does resistance feel like? I think in order to sometimes acknowledge something, we have to know, like, the signs and symptoms of it, right? Like, if you're getting the flu, you can feel that there are certain things coming along, right? If you're getting your period, you feel like you have these signs that are like your little warnings, like, oh, okay, something's gonna happen soon. Um, so I think that the resistance has like a similar effect on us. It's like, um, there's these things that we might start avoiding or whatever. And so his first point is that it feels like unhappiness. So, when you're not doing something that's in your nature to do, and we've talked a lot about this in the art of living, you're gonna see so many similarities. I'm gonna try not to continue to say that. I've said that now, okay? But if you follow that series along, there's a lot of similarities. But yeah, so you have this unhappiness, like, you're not doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And that sort of thing can start to turn into more serious matters. So, you might turn to drinking, self-medicating. You might, waste time on your cell phone. There's a lot of different things like that that kind of numb us and like take us out of what we're doing, right? Kind of take us to another place mentally so we don't have to think about it. For some people, that could be as serious as like, getting an addiction, taking drugs, that sort of stuff. For others, it could be something a little bit more mild, but that's kind of one of the ways that you can tell that this is a resistance is that, here's this unhappiness in your life, and now you want to numb it instead of trying to figure out what is making you unhappy. Another kind of side effect is like victimization. So he talks about, if you're kind of like playing this victim role and, you're like, oh, the world's against me and I can't do my thing because like blah, blah, blah. Like that's another just, excuse as to why, you're basically just another thing of resistance, right? An excuse as to why you're not doing something. And, to him, that's not valid. Like, the victimizing yourself, like, are you actually a victim in this scenario? And, like, how long can you play that role, I know our society, and I gotta tread lightly here, but our society loves victims, and we love a sad story. I mean, even if you watch like a game show or something, it's like everyone has their sad little backstory, and it's like you want to root for them because, they're the underdog or whatever. They make great stories and they're very entertaining, but when you let something like that kind of take over your life, it becomes part of your identity. And I think after this, after this month, I'm going to get into a whole thing about identity. But what is that for? Do you want to play the victim your whole life, or do you want to actually like move forward and do something really cool, like something that you've always dreamed about? And then the other thing that he kind of talks about is, we might decide to get ourselves into trouble. So instead of dealing with the fact that, hey, I have this really crazy dream that I want to do, I want to write my screenplay, I'm going to go and do whatever. And so, this might be where people get themselves into like some cheating scenarios. Maybe they steal something from the store just to get a rush. So like, I don't know, but, not only is, getting in trouble, like we see this in kids a lot, it's like a cry for attention, right? But it's also one of those things that like can distract us and stop us from doing what we should really be doing. So when you start realizing that there's something in your life that's stopping you from moving forward and you have somewhat of a control over it, we can't help if we get sick. We can't help if we find our partner's cheating on us. We can't help those certain scenarios, but we can help how we feel. And I talk about that all the time. Like, you can control your emotions. You control how you react towards things. And even when it's really hard, But to have these ideas and things that we want to accomplish and then not do so because of these things that might be of self creation is, really too bad. And it's just a manifestation basically of the resistance. So, this says, as artists and professionals, it is our obligation to enact our own internal revolution, a private insurrection inside our own skulls. In this uprising, we free ourselves from the tyranny of consumer culture. We overthrow the programming of advertising, movies, video games, magazines, TV, and MTV, by which we have been hypnotized from the cradle. We unplug ourselves from the grid by recognizing that we will never cure our restlessness by contributing to our disposable income to the bottom line of Bullshit Incorporated but only by doing our work. Okay, so basically he's saying when we give in to these things, and that was another kind of part of all of that, is like, not only can we find all of these distractions and these, hard things, but also, like, we have the entire world that kind of, like, in our consumer culture, advertising to us, knowing that we're looking for an outlet, knowing that there's stuff that we should all be doing to better ourselves, but instead decide to, sit on the couch and watch a movie and eat Girl Scout cookies. I totally did not do that this weekend. But, like, that's the reality of it. So, basically, the only thing that can stop that is by you deciding, I'm not going to sit on the couch and watch movies and eat Girl Scout cookies. I am going to do my work. I'm going to put my energy and my focus into my screenplay. So if you're, trying to work on something and you're feeling this resistance, you're feeling unhappy, you're looking for other outlets to put your energy into, basically avoiding anything that has to do with the thing that you say and think and want to do, it's probably a good indicator that you're supposed to be doing that thing. So, resistance, Steven Pressfield says, loves fear. It is fueled by fear. So the more scared of something you are, and people talk about that one all the time, right? Like, oh, I'm afraid of being successful, and it sounds cheesy, and to a certain extent, I'm sure there are some people like that. I've gone over this one a lot in my head. That's not so much the thing that is my problem. But for some people, it can be, right? Like, you can just be afraid of how it'll change your life. And that's totally legitimate. Like, if you're successful at this thing, then it could cause a lot of problems for you. It could be a big investment, so there's fear if you're, like, wanting to add on to your house, or maybe invest into some stocks, or, I don't know, maybe there's an investment aspect to it. You're scared that you might lose a lot of money, and that's also totally legitimate. Most of our fears are really legitimate. But the thing is like, you're not going to have change if you don't have a little risk there, right? So, as hard as it can be, sometimes we have to figure out how to overcome that. But if there's fear involved, it's probably something that you should be doing. So, try to take that into consideration. Like, okay, like, I'm not feeling, like, why are you scared of it? Is it fear because, there's, trying to think, like, is it a good fear or a bad fear? And I guess, like, a good fear would be like, this could really change my life for the better, and a bad fear would be like, this is not something that I ever wanted for my life, and, like, somebody else, like, don't let other people project on you. So if I'm, like, sitting here saying this and you're like, oh, my husband wants to invest all of our money into some crazy business endeavor, and you don't feel good about it, and you're, like, really scared, that's not your thing. That's his thing, right? So, if it's your thing and you have fear for your thing, then maybe it is actually something you're supposed to do. If you have a call to action to do it, is another good indicator that this is something that you should be doing. So, the more important a call or action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel towards pursuing it. So if you do have this sort of call to action and you just have all this shit that just keeps coming up, and coming up, again, probably means that this is something that's really important and that you probably should try to figure out to do in your life. And then the last one, which is my personal favorite, is procrastination. So this is on page 21. Procrastination is the most common manifestation of resistance because it's the easiest to rationalize. We don't tell ourselves, I'm never going to write my symphony. Instead, we say, I'm going to write my symphony. I'm just going to start tomorrow. Music to my ears. I love procrastination. So yeah, I don't know what it is. I am totally of that mentality, like what I can put off today, I can do tomorrow sort of thing. I love to wait till the very last minute to get shit done. It is an issue I've had my entire life, and I've worked on it, and there are times where it gets a little bit better, and then there's times when it gets crazy again. And the times when it gets crazy is probably when I am feeling the resistance. And that's what's kind of cool about this book, right? Is like, the resistance is this like thing, this imaginary thing, right? But it is real in the sense that there's all these things that can be related towards it and to when we're trying to do something to better ourselves. And I just don't like when there is stuff that I really want to do. I have like so many ideas, but I just get so weird about starting them. And then also I've realized that like there's other stuff in my life that I then do instead to procrastinate for the thing that I really should be doing. So like cleaning my house, like I can procrastinate that shit all day, but will I ever procrastinate it with writing? No, I won't. Working out also can procrastinate that. Have like a hierarchy of levels of, okay, now I'm just sitting here. I have time to write. You know what? I need to do the dishes. Okay, I'm just sitting here. I have time to write. You know what? I didn't do my workout yet today. I need to do my workout. Or oh, I'm just sitting here. I need to work out. Never writing comes up, but always cleaning or something stupid. Not stupid, but something that's just not that important. Not that having your house clean isn't important, and I do like making time for that. But it's really weird. It's I don't know if you guys have a hierarchy of what can I do instead. I don't like doing this thing, but I'll even sometimes clean the bathroom over writing. That's how I know that it's really important that I do it, because I hate cleaning the bathrooms. You guys know I hate cleaning the bathrooms. Okay, so we've talked so much about all these things about resistance, what the feeling is, all of that. And, overall, it is really just this distraction in our lives, these excuses that we make up. But the root of it, and this is what the author says, is that it's basically an evil force that only understands power. And it will not stop until it has won. So this isn't something that ever goes away. He has been writing. This is a very successful writer, and he is writing this book, and he's still talking about how he almost didn't write it because of resistance. So he says it's the enemy within, which is kind of how it's able to grab a hold of us so well. It's something that's manifested inside of us. He talks about that it's not personal, it's like a force of nature, and I totally agree with that, because I've been thinking a lot, and I've heard this a few different times, especially by people in the fitness industry. I feel like they really get this a lot because they, nobody likes working out. It's not fun. And I mean, some people might enjoy it to a certain extent, but I think that they're very special people. But it's hard. It feels good to move around and stuff for me, but, it is very hard for me to work out and eat healthy. I really have to concentrate on doing that. And so I've heard a lot recently from different fitness industry people that, our body isn't used to change, okay? So, like, genetically, our body is used to, like, we know adversity is going to come. So, until that moment happens, like, let's just stay calm and, like, collected and, like, let's not exert too much energy because we don't know when we might have to, like, run for our lives from, like, a giant man eating animal, right? And it might not be, like, that serious anymore, but, like, we aren't programmed to do things like, to change our lives. And then once we do, though, we obviously see, like, oh, this is better. It becomes, like, the new normal for us. But change is really good because it helps us grow. And even genetically, those were, back in the caveman times, or, when even, like, not even that long ago, like, having certain adversities on us were good because it did help us grow. It helped make us into better people. We learned more, we got more experience. The first people that came along and saw the giant man-eating animal, they were like, oh, maybe this thing's friendly. And then somebody gets eaten and everyone has to run for their lives. And, like, other people are getting eaten because they can't outrun the beast. Like, you know what I mean? Then people start to realize, oh, we got to get more clever. We got to get more clever. We got to get more clever. And that's growth, and that's how people do better. But genetically, we're not modified to just accept change like robots. And, like, oh, here's my upload. Okay, awesome. Change is scary, and it's different, and God forbid we become better people, right? And it's like we know these things, but the resistance that manifests inside of us that's been there since the dawn of time is like, no, stay exactly where you are. Um, so, it creates all of these issues for us. And a lot of this stuff is, self provoked. It's our own self creating these different things going on. Um, but sometimes it might feel like it's coming from the outside, but it's us because we have a control. We can decide what we're willing and willing not to deal with. And when we let these outside things bother us, that's still the manifestation of the inner resistance that is like, yeah, don't do that thing to make yourself better. Don't write your screenplay. Just be, the little housewife and never do anything crazy again. So, yeah. So this kind of leads me into, again, basically the resistance are just excuses. And sometimes our excuses are really simple, right? Instead of, you're supposed to wake up early to work out. Oh, you know what? I want to have a little bit more sleep today. And you can look at that and you can say to yourself, like, I copped out on today's workout. I understand resistance. I let this get the best of me. And, I decided sleep over working out, okay? Sometimes it's a little bit harder, and it could be scenarios of, like, dealing with some pretty emotional, traumatic things and feeling very reasonable in why you're not doing something. So maybe, you were supposed to, start a new job. And you were super excited about starting this new job. It was going to be a whole new thing for you. And then your husband says he wants a divorce. Emotionally, you might be really torn apart. It comes out of the blue, or maybe your, family member dies, like something really tragic, okay? It would be really easy to say, you know what, I'm just going to put this off for right now because I need to heal from this. I have this personal stuff going on and I need to figure that out first. And this is where the book gets tough because it tells you that's kind of bullshit. It's the same as making an excuse as to not waking up on time for a workout versus, saying to yourself, oh, maybe when I'm more financially prepared, then I can do this. Like, if this is something that you want to do, then you have to figure it out. And you can't let these sometimes very reasonable excuses stop you from doing what you want to do. And so, there's a lot of, this kind of leads into rationalizing what you have going on. Like, oh, like my wife and I are about to have, I think this was the example in the book, like we're about to have a baby and, I am just super overwhelmed right now. I'm not going to, build that deck. I'll wait for the baby to be done, or baby to be born. But it's like, once the baby comes, life isn't going to get any easier, right? Like, that baby's going to be in your life for hopefully the rest of your life. And even though it gets a little bit more self-sufficient, there's still always going to be stuff going on. So it's like, you kind of have to figure out how to live your life. And he does a really good job kind of breaking this down. And he's like, basically, you have your artistic, creative self, okay? That self that wants to do this thing. So for me, I want to write my screenplay, right? And then you have who you are as a person. And those two things, he says, are exclusive. Now, you can disagree, and that's totally fine. I really like to think of it that way because I think it gives us a little more control over our lives. So if I can think of my creative self separate from anything else that's going in my life, nothing else can touch that. So when I go to sit down and write a screenplay, I can use all my life experience, the hard times, the good times, the weird times, anything. I can use all of that for the creative self, but the creative self doesn't have to be tormented by what's going on. I can sit down, I can do my work, and then I can come back and try to work on some of that other stuff. And I think that's really hard for us because we want to feel like, I think this is another part of it too. It's that it almost feels like being a creative person or maybe doing a special project or going into a new business venture or whatever your thing is feels like a luxury, or it could feel like a privilege. And if you don't have your life fully figured out, it's hard to give yourself those privileges. But I don't think they are privileges. They're just another part of us, and it's up to us to honor them. And so we're actually doing ourselves a lot of disservice when we don't go for it, because I think it's harder to heal those other parts of who we are when we're not being artistic. I mean, you see so many artists, we're very tortured people. And look at how many creative things and amazing things that they did. And however they got there, their resistance was overcome because they needed to make that. And I wish I had more of that quality, but I think it's just a matter of finding your time and figuring it out, reading books like this to sort of help you get over things. But it's a hard thing to do, and it's so easy. Like, I wouldn't blame anybody if they're going through a hard time in their life, being like, I'm just going to put that thing on hold for a second. But sometimes when we do that, our life doesn't actually get any better. And instead, we're just missing out on a really important part of who we are. And then the last thing is kind of like just people in our lives. Again, this could kind of go into like the rationalizing aspect too, where like other people outside of you are have stuff going on that doesn't really have anything to do with you, but you're going to use them as an excuse. So, maybe your kid is getting in trouble at school. So yeah, you might feel like this is a personal thing, but at the end of the day, like if your kid's in high school and they're getting in trouble on a regular basis, like that's up to them to figure out. You can only help them to a certain extent, right? And that sort of thing certainly shouldn't stop you from doing what you want to do. Or if maybe you have a family member who's sick, figure out how much you can contribute to helping them. But I know this is really hard, and it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your mind around, but you still have to live your life. And it's just like with so much that's going on, and I was kind of talking about this last week, like to some extent, like, yes, it's horrible. But there's always going to be tragedy in the world, and we just have to figure out how to continue to overcome it and not use it as a resistance to not do what we want to do and not do that, not write your screenplay. Like, whatever is happening in another part of the world that technically doesn't really affect my life right now, why should that stop me from writing my screenplay? And then also with people, sometimes, people will cast judgment. And a lot of times, if you're overcoming your resistance, people will recognize this, and it'll kind of like invoke some jealousy and some negative talk towards you. They might say things like, you're changed, you're not the same person anymore. And all of this is a manifestation of resistance trying to get you to stop doing what you're doing. And again, I think that's just another indicator, like, if these people are supposed to be positive, good people for your life, like, they'll come around and figure it out, even if they have a hard time at first kind of like getting there, because whatever you're doing might take a lot of effort and time, right? But if they're good people in your life and, they're there for the right reasons, then hopefully they understand that, what you're committing to and what you're doing is important for yourself, and, you guys can kind of figure it out. Obviously, like, if you're, if I'm just sitting upstairs and writing my screenplay all night long and I don't spend time with my husband, that would cause some friction, right? So that's where I try to look at my schedule and figure out, like, how can I work in my thing with his time and all of that. If you're someone who doesn't have a lot of extra time, like, again, it's hard for some of us, but it's an excuse. And so I know that's really harsh, but if this is something that you want to do, you just have to figure it out. You have to figure out the things that you can kind of take off your schedule so that you can fit this in. Spending time with your family shouldn't be one of those things. So, where, like, maybe on your lunch break you do the thing or whatever it is, and it's uncomfortable. And that's another thing that we have to remember. Like, if you're trying to work out and it's impossible for you to wake up at 5 a.m. to go work out before work, but you have an hour lunch break, eat at your desk, go work out for 45 minutes, and come back to work. And that is probably incredibly uncomfortable, and you probably have to rush around, and it's a lot. But if you want it to be a priority in your life, you have to make it a priority. So yeah, and then also, like, if you find yourself kind of from that other point of view, like, instead of people giving you shit, you're kind of giving other people shit. You're criticizing people. You're looking on Instagram and, like, social media and being like, oh, fuck that bitch. Like, you're looking at people from high school and you're like, who are they? Like, that's just another manifestation of resistance as well. And another calling to, this is probably the thing that I should be doing. So when you're having feelings of jealousy and insecurities and stuff like that, and you're just being kind of, like, negative and you're hearing yourself talk and you're like, where's this shit coming from? Another indicator of resistance and that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, because it's really hard. And this is where we can empathize with people when we are trying to overcome our resistance. It's really hard to see somebody, do what they want to do, and regardless of how great they are at it or whatever, just putting themselves out there and trying something and trying to better themselves, sometimes that's really hard for us to watch, especially if they're doing something that you personally would love to be doing. So if you're feeling those sorts of things, don't give in to the gossip and the criticism and all of that, because that's just continuing to resist. Instead, start actually working towards the thing that you want to be doing. Like, if you're really into jujitsu, I don't know why I thought of that, but, and you're seeing all this stuff and you've never taken a class, go sign up for a class. Go try it out. See if this is even something that you really want to do. Don't just sit and look at your phone and be like, oh man, like, these people are so dumb. Like, I could do that, like, that kind of talk isn't, what is it for, It just makes us feel better, I guess. I don't know. But the reality is you're not going to feel better. You just stew in your own mean thoughts and don't actually accomplish anything. You don't better yourself. You're just putting negative energy out in the world. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. The last point I'd kind of like to make is just while you're figuring out your resistance and what that thing is that is really important for you to be doing, we all have something. Like, everyone wants to do something. We have a hobby, we have an interest, we have a goal, whatever it is. And it's up to us to honor those things and to remember that we all deserve it. It's part of our nature. It's, maybe a gift from God if you want to think of it that way. But to be able to get to some points of like true happiness and fulfillment, we should honor what that is inside of us that we want to do. But one of the things that he does kind of mention in the book is kind of prepare for a little bit of isolation while you do this. And that's in a few different kind of ways. Like, one, it could literally be like you sitting in a room writing on your computer for a while without anybody around. For some people, that might be hard to handle. It could be you starting the thing on your own. Maybe you have a new business and, you don't have any money to invest in it. So you've got to be the one that gets it going. Maybe it's just that you don't have the support of family and friends. So you want to make some life changes and you want to start eating healthier and working out, and no one else in your family is down with that. They want their pizza and chicken nuggets for dinner, and you're like, well, I want to eat chicken breast and salad. And so maybe that means that you're kind of on your own. Like, maybe there's something, you make your own dinner, and there can be moments of feeling like isolated, and that is not a bad thing. That's something that we should kind of embrace, because this is a personal journey. This is, even if you're doing a business venture with somebody, you still have to be personally invested, right? No matter how invested they are, they can kind of help hold you accountable. And then to my next point, like, when you do have support, that is so awesome. But you need to kind of take or leave it, because the thing with support is, people can only be around so much. So, if you're trying to do something important, you're not necessarily going to have everybody there being your cheerleader 24/7. So if this isn't something that's coming from within, if you aren't overcoming this resistance and these feelings within yourself, then you're not going to be successful at doing it. So prepare for isolated feelings and what those are, and also prepare, for not having support, from having support but not relying on it. Just really being your own personal cheerleader and your own personal kind of coach through all of it. And so then the last thing I'm going to say is that resistance can be beaten. So we've talked so much about what it is and how hard it is and how it's always there and constantly within us trying to work against us. But this book is here as proof that, as is all of the art and wonderful, cool things in our life, resistance can be overcome. And so he says here on the last page, if resistance couldn't be beaten, there would be no Fifth Symphony, no Romeo and Juliet, no Golden Gate Bridge. Defeating resistance is like giving birth. It seems absolutely impossible until you remember that women have been pulling it off successfully, with support and without, for 50 million years. So, no offense to women, I'm sure giving birth, I've not done it, he's not done it. Very difficult, but there's so much truth in that. This is something that people have been overcoming and dealing with since the dawn of time. So even though it seems really hard, just think about where we would be if nobody was like, you know what, fuck this resistance, I'm just going to go ahead and like make an iPhone. Like, I know that's not how it happened, but if there wasn't people within these companies, if there wasn't people within the art community, if there wasn't people in Hollywood, if there wasn't people, anywhere, If there wasn't someone in your office that was just like, hey, you know what? We should have casual Fridays. And that was like so important to them, and they made that happen, you know? Think of how our lives would be different, and how little change there would be if people weren't able to overcome this. So the cool thing is people do it, and you can too. It's just up to us to figure out what it is that we want to do, and then figuring out how to get over those hurdles. And I really don't want you guys to channel robot mode, because I've talked about this before. It really is about figuring out the reason why you want to do this thing, and then looking at the reasons and excuses as to what your resistance is. So for me, my procrastination, it's still a mystery to me. I really don't know. I thought maybe I'm, I was kind of mentioning before, like, is it a fear of success? Nope, it's not a fear of success. I embrace that very much. But, there's a lot of other things that I've kind of figured out that have been the wrong reasons for why I've wanted to do things. And I think that's kind of held me up a little bit. So now it's a matter of kind of figuring out, like, okay, I know those things, but why does procrastination still play such a big part in my life? So anyways, I'm working on it too. Hopefully, once we get to the second book, we will get to dive into that a little bit better and maybe have some answers there. So again, this is The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and hearing this perspective. Like I said, if there's something that you've been wanting to do, this is a great time to pick up this book, or at least listen and watch the podcast, because it's important. It's important for who we are, and especially, to bring it back to housewives specifically, we are more than just taking care of a home. They're not that doesn't have any satisfaction to it, because it totally does. But, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there's only so much of my day that I can fill with cleaning and cooking and all that stuff. So, I personally have a need, and I think most people do. Like, even if you have a really cool job, you might have a need for something else. You might inspire to cook, and you don't have time to do that, right? So, we all have our things. But I think it's really important for housewives to have something that's theirs and kind of go after what it is that, makes them want to feel happy and good about themselves. And I just want to be very encouraging to you guys to do those sorts of things, and acknowledge your resistance and just try to overcome it to the best you can. So tune in next week as hopefully we kind of figure out a little bit more about that. But yeah, thank you guys for so much for listening to another week's episode. Please like, subscribe, comment. Go subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. The first one went out on the 2nd, I think, of March. So if you haven't got one and you signed up for the monthly newsletter, check your spam folder. That's where mine was hidden. I was like, where did this email go? It went straight to my junk, so that was very encouraging. But I just kind of tell a little bit about what's ahead for the month. And I'm going to be starting a blog soon, so I keep talking about it. I haven't written one yet. Hello, procrastination. I have a really fun idea. Well, it's kind of different, of a story that I kind of want to write and have it be like a blog entry and kind of keep it going for a little while. So maybe I'll get that done this week. We'll see. I'll overcome my resistance and get it done. So anyways, thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your week. And cheers. I'll see you soon. Bye.